there's one thing to know about self-doubt that will transform you, it's what I'm about to reveal over the next few minutes. Once this clicks for you, self-doubt will lose its grip forever. The constant second-guessing and hesitation will dissolve. Making bold, life-changing decisions will excite you rather than scare you. What you will get from other videos on dealing with self-doubt is just the same old self-help advice repackaged, such as affirmations and journaling. That's not what this video is about. Nor will I tell you a different version of, you just need to believe in yourself. What I will give you here is what worked incredibly well for me and my clients for the past 10 years. Once you get this, there's no going back. No more playing small. So what is even meant by self-doubt? We talk about this all the time, or we hear people say, I doubt myself, or people ask you, are you doubting yourself? We never really stop to define that. What does that actually mean? What are you doubting? Are you doubting your ability to do something? Or are you doubting whether or not you even exist? Are you doubting whether or not you're good enough or you deserve it? These are all very different things. They mean completely different things. So let's make sure that we're separating them out, because I think it's this sort of confusion that people have where they haven't clearly defined what they mean by self-doubt. They just have a feeling, and then they use that feeling to generalize it to multiple meanings that are not very useful or not serving you. The first thing is, if you doubt yourself, are you doubting your existence? Well, that's pretty obvious that you exist. If you are hearing me right now, if you can even doubt yourself, that would be proof that you do in fact exist. The reason why I bring this up is that this does not stop people from trying to prove something like that. They feel like they are in fact trying to prove they exist. Now, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to prove their worth. They're trying to prove that they're good enough or that they deserve. That's really what they're after, but it often gets conflated with this feeling of like, well, I just need to prove my existence, or I need to prove that I am worthy of existing on this planet. We don't often think of it that way, but the feeling that we have and the compulsion to prove that or to overcome that self-doubt is often driven by exactly that, an erroneous idea, an idea that when we put it out on the table and shine light on it, sounds rather ridiculous. But if you check in with yourself, that's often what you're trying to do when you suffer from self-doubt, and that's holding you back. Because if it was really about you doubting your ability to do something, well, then that's pretty easy. You just go and practice that ability, cultivate that skill, study what you need to study, learn what you need to learn. If that's really all your doubt is about, that's an easy fix. But for most people, they suffer from crippling self-doubt, and they can't even make that first step. They're not even comfortable enough embarking on the beginning of the journey or taking that first step toward that goal, because their doubt is so severe that it is much more deeply rooted in what we call self-worth than just doubting your abilities or your skills. Because like I said, if it's really just about doubting your skills or your abilities, easy. You just go learn that skill. You go study what you need to study. You get better by practicing what you need to practice to get better at it. Simple, easy fix. But if you're doubting your worth, if you're doubting your value, that's something different entirely, and that is very crippling. That will stop you from taking steps to go forward, because there will be this fear that if you don't measure up, if you don't live up to it, it's proof that you're not worthy. It's proof that you're not good enough or that you don't deserve. Now that's very scary. I have done other videos on dealing with self-worth and low self-worth. What I'll say here is there is no such thing as self-worth. So any attempt to measure it, prove it, is trying to prove the impossible. It is very unlikely that me just saying that makes that whole thing go away for you. What I'll do is, at the end of this, I'll give you a fast and dirty way to deal with that. Because the whole self-doubt idea or feeling comes from a place of trying to prove your worth, the more you try to overcome self-doubt, if that's what you're attaching it to, the worse that it becomes. Any attempt to overcome that self-doubt only increases that doubt, because you're trying to prove the impossible. If you're constantly trying to prove something that cannot be proven, then you're going to be riddled with doubt about that. And really, what is it that you're trying to prove? There is no self to doubt. There is only a concept of you that you're aware of. So sure, you exist, but what you know of yourself existing is based on a concept, based on the idea that you have, based on all of the beliefs that you have about yourself. And other people around you, the way that they perceive you, they each have an individual concept of you. So who's right? Who actually knows the real you? Well, nobody does. So you have your concept of you, and then there's everyone else's concept of you. By that, there is no self to prove. There is no self to doubt. And the sooner you can start to understand this, that it's just a concept, the more you will feel relieved, and the more you will understand that what you're really doubting is just a concept, not an actual thing like yourself. There's nothing there to doubt. If you want to say, okay, well, but I have a body, and so I must exist, then yes, you do. So what are you doubting? There would be, if you can acknowledge that you are a physical form, then there's nothing to doubt. So it's everything else that you're doubting, and it's part of your self-concept is attached to this idea of self-worth, and because of that, it creates these awful feelings of low self-worth. Now that's different than self-esteem, and this is kind of a different topic because yes, it is good to feel good about yourself, and how you feel good about yourself is being able to validate what's important to you. When you go about it through self-worth, you're trying to measure something. You're trying to find an objective scale or a way, or metric to measure your value, and that just does not exist, and it never will. What people do is they often compare themselves to others to try to get a sense of their worth. And trust me, that has never helped you. That has never benefited you. That only creates more and more problems. So if there is no self to doubt, and there is no such thing as self-worth, what are you left with? What doubts are you actually left with? Like I said, what you're going to be left with is just the doubting of whether or not you're capable of doing something, whether or not you have the skill to do something. And if that's all there is, then the only thing that separates you between you and what you want is just knowledge, cultivation of knowledge, cultivating skills or abilities or competencies that you don't have now. But that has absolutely nothing to do with like your value or your worth. You just need to go and cultivate those things. But if you're believing that there is a self that can be proven, and that there's a self that can be doubted, and that your worth can go up and down based on whether or not you succeed, that's going to prevent you from going out there and learning those skills and learning those abilities, because at the end of the day, you will have this idea in your head that despite all that, you might just not be good enough. And I have my own personal story of that, of I failed many times. And like I said, I was riddled with self-doubt for most of my life. But at the point where I was starting to see that self-worth wasn't real, I had a major failure in my business. I brought about real doubts of, am I good enough? Do I deserve this? Am I worthy? At this time, I was doing a lot of work on myself. So I was also realizing that that really wasn't true. I had to separate those two in order for me to move on and move forward, and realize that the only thing that I was doubting was really a concept of myself. I just needed to learn what went wrong and how to do what I needed to do differently to turn that failure into a success. And if that's all it was, it really took away all the noise, it took away all the pain, to just realize that the only thing that separated me from succeeding was just having more knowledge, understanding more, which could also mean that I needed to fail more times to find out what wasn't working until I found something that did. When you pull the whole self part of it out, all the self-worth and all the self-doubt, when you pull all of that out of it, then it's just a matter of learning. It's just a matter of getting better. It's just a matter of cultivating that skill and becoming more and more competent. When you start living that way and not passing everything through your self-worth and then doubting yourself and all that, you succeed much faster. You have a lot more energy. You have a lot more focus. You're not being tied up in all these concepts of worthiness that slow everyone down and then may even stop you entirely. So you set all that aside and you just get focused on what it is that you want and what you need to do to get it. Now, I know that listening to me in this one sitting is not going to completely remove this for you. It's planting a seed. It's allowing the sunlight to break through and get some truth in there about what's actually happening. The more you realize this, and the more you question those feelings of self-doubt and deservingness and whether or not you're good enough, the more you question those, the more they will fall apart. And the more those feelings will start to realign with what is true. The truth is there's no self to doubt. There is no such thing as self-worth. And once you start to connect with that truth more and more, this becomes easier and easier. It just becomes an understanding that you carry with you that you don't have to be reminded of. Once you understand it, there's no going back. For now, though, what you can do is use a frame that we use in neurolinguistic programming, NLP, called the as-if frame. This is different than fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it is trying to pretend like you have something like an ability or money or whatever when you don't. And when you fantasize like that and you get drunk on that fantasy, you create a real delusion and you live in a fantasy world of you already have everything that you want when you actually don't. So you're more drunk on that fantasy which at some point there will be a reckoning. You'll have to wake up from that fantasy and realize that all the stuff that you assumed to be true is just not, and you're left with nothing. That's not what the as if frame is. The as if frame is act as if, or think about it as if. Right now, you're probably, despite everything that I said here, still carrying around this idea of self and self-doubt and self-worth. What if none of those things were true? What if there was no self, there was no self-worth, so your self-worth can't go up and it can't go down because it doesn't exist? What do you do differently starting today? What choices do you make that's different right now? You never had to worry about lowering your self-worth ever again. What do you do differently? Apply the as-if frame. What will happen is you'll start to get a sense more and more of what it is that I'm talking about, and that will become more and more real to you, so that you'll start functioning from that reality rather than the illusion of self, self-worth, and self-doubt. Now, one of the things that people really get caught up on is making decisions, because they fear that they'll make a decision that they'll regret. And again, this is tied to lowering my self-worth if I make a bad decision, if I'm wrong. If that concerns you and you want to make decisions without being tied down by fear of regret, you definitely want to check out this next video where I cover how to make decisions you will not regret.